Hey guys, so today we have part 2 of session 4. It's going to be pretty similar to yesterday, but we're just going to take it a little bit further. So yesterday we worked on retelling, and this was that practice of pulling out only the important details. This was kind of similar to a summary, but really just getting rid of that fluff. Really pulling out the 5 main details from 6 chapters, which was really hard to do. So we were learning how to kind of eliminate what wasn't necessary and only tell our audience about the really important events. And we were making sure they were in order. So that's that chronological retelling, making sure that the events happen in order, kind of like a timeline. So today we're going to work on pausing and synthesizing. So we're going to have to go back to some earlier parts of the book. Synthesizing is when you put the pieces together. So yesterday we were kind of just telling readers what happened, or telling our audience, I guess, what happened. It was kind of like, first this happened, then this, and we were kind of just putting the events in order. But today we're actually synthesizing. We're putting some pieces together. We're kind of thinking the book as a puzzle. So we're going to take some parts from earlier in the book, reflect back on them, bring them into the current part that we're reading, and we're going to kind of take the pieces and put them together today. So a really, really good trait of good readers is looking back at your books and cementing your comprehension. What that means is going back to previous pages and making sure you're reading everything correctly. Sometimes we do this with some sort of prediction. You might be like, oh, I thought this was going to happen, and then you go back a few pages and it's not what you thought. So retelling was just telling the events in order. And then if we look at this image right here, let me get my pen out. We're no longer just telling the events in order. We're also using the backstory, and we're thinking back on previous important things that have happened. So some examples here are in the past, but this time, or this is most likely going to cause. So we're still using these main events, but we're saying how it's really going to change the book or how it's really impacted the characters. So a good example is in the past, Rob was really passive and really shy and didn't really speak up for himself. But this time, and this is from chapter 6, he stands up for Sistine. This is most likely going to cause maybe a relationship between him and Sistine so they can be friends. Or this is most likely going to cause the bullies to be angry. So we're really using what happened in previous chapters and then what happened in this chapter and combining all of the information. So it's a little bit different than retelling. So here is, I want to look back on chapter 6. We read it yesterday. I want to retell some of the chapter, but I want to make sure we're really synthesizing. So we're going to summarize the chapter, but we're also going to add in other parts of the story. So you could, if someone said retell chapter 6, you could tell them about just chapter 6, which would work, but it makes a whole lot more sense if we go back to earlier parts of the book. So if we make it sound more like, okay, well, in chapter 6, blah, 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 blah happened, but in chapter 5, we saw this development cause this in chapter 6. A lot of times there is like a previous cause and effect. Things in other chapters cause things to happen. And it's important we don't skip out on those. So I like this little song type poem. Read a little, think a little, read a little, think a little, put it all together and grow a little more. Read a little, think a little, read a little, think a little, synthesize, and you can grow some more. So the idea here is that we're not just reading and retelling. We read, we say what happened. We read, we say what happened. Now we're really reflecting back on our previous thinking. So what I want to do is I want to show us, I have this pulled up already. I'm going to kind of talk you guys through chapter 6, my retell, but I'm going to throw in a few little bits and pieces that reflect back on previous chapters. So we have here in chapter 6, Rob comes back. He goes to lunch. And at lunch, Sistine decides that she's gonna start a fight. And this is interesting because in the previous chapters, we originally thought that Sistine was going to, I guess, be this like little princess type girl, we thought. Turns out she's actually very, very fierce. So Sistine sees Rob sitting on the bench. They throw something at her. She decides she's going to do something about it. And I'm just kind of scrolling through the words here with you guys so you can kind of see it. Sistine goes crazy, gets in this fight. And then Rob yells to leave her alone. And this is interesting because previously Rob was really shy, never spoke up for himself, never spoke up for others. So in this chapter, we see him all of a sudden get brave. And he yells, "Leave her alone." And so then he took off running, and they weren't running after him anymore, and he saves Sistine. So that would be kind of a quick synthesis. I would say really the focus here, if you guys can tell, is going back to the previous chapters. So this is really about, I could have just said, Rob goes to lunch, he sits on a bench. They throw something at Sistine, she starts a fight, he speaks up for her, they run away and he saves her. That would be a really quick retell. That's just what happened in this chapter. But this is where we're throwing in other interjections of previous chapters. So stuff like, oh, okay, so Sistine, we'd thought originally, she wasn't fierce. That's something from a previous chapter. Rob speaking up, we could reflect back on his previous actions there. Him saving Sistine, that's interesting. We wouldn't have thought that was coming since she wasn't very nice to him in the beginning. So the idea here is really just reflecting back on previous chapters when you talk about the current chapter. So let me get this pulled back up here. So for you today, I want you to focus on taking notes, reflecting back. So what I want you to do is, I would have you reach your arms back. I obviously can't see you, but you have your choice of earlier or before or in the past. So we're reflecting back, but now. So again, this could say something like, in the past, Rob was really shy, but now, reach your arm forward, or reach your arm back and then forward, Rob is actually standing up for himself. So if you want to do the arm motion, you can, but in the past, you reach back, but now you reach forward. In the past, Sistine was really kind of mean to Rob, reach forward, but now she's actually standing up for him. I'm going to ask you for at least 2 notes today, at least one for Sistine and one for Rob, of in the past, Sistine was blank, but now she was blank, or before Rob was blank and now he's blank. If you want to do more, you could. I think there's definitely more than 2. But a minimum of 1 sentence or 1 note per character today. So your goal today is, we really are still working on that pausing and orienting. What we were doing yesterday is we're pausing and retelling. So pausing and just saying what happened in the chapter. Well, now we're taking it a step further. We're pausing, we're saying what's happening in the chapter, and then kind of adding it back to previous chapters. I think that this is kind of reflecting back. I will have these sentence frames posted in Google Classroom to help guide your notes today. Obviously, you can come back to this lesson and pause it and look at them as well. But again, your focus today is really reflecting on what we read in previous chapters and how it applies to the current chapter. So we'll be reading chapter 7, and you will be thinking back on how Rob and Sistine were in the past and how much they've changed until now.